Welcome back. I'm so glad you're here today. I want to talk today about our addiction to speed in our culture and some practices that we can employ to deliberately move out of that space. We have a lot of aspects of our culture that produce more speed, more quickness, more convenience, more instant gratification in our lives, all sorts of things, right? Speed dating, speed dieting, microwave ovens, multitasking, ways to trying to get more things done more quickly. We're learning a lot about the ways that those practices might not produce the benefits in the way that they seem they might. I remember when I was a young adult starting to need to handle more of the adult tasks of life. And I remember saying to somebody that my goal in every day was to get things done as quickly as possible so that I could have everything off my plate, to complete the to-do list as quickly as possible. And then I thought that I would have all this space. And I think that's actually a really salient point. I think that a lot of what we are creating and have created has been in the service of wanting to have more space in which we think we can slow down and savor. Taking 2 minutes to make your dinner instead of 20, or trying to get 3 things done at once so that you can get them all off your plate. They seem to be in service of making more time. The problem, I think, is that nature abhors a vacuum, is the idiom. I guess that's what that is. Nature abhors a vacuum, right? Which means that where there is space, if that space isn't protected, something will move into that space and fill it up. And I think that is very true. The things that we have done in order to try to make more space have actually just created more space where we can do more things. The push for productivity, the push for getting more done, even things like AI, the way that it's being used, the way that I see it being used in some of the tech apps that I use, is in service of doing stuff for you more quickly than you could do it. But you're not going to use that time to sit and meditate or to observe a flower blooming. You're going to fill that time with something else. And so I think it's worth just noticing that where there is not intention, then the default mode is to do more, to fill that space with more doing. And I think that speaks a lot to why in this day and age where we have so much technology, where we have so much less to do actually in some ways than our ancestors, because so much is done for us, right? Our ancestors, let's say my great grandparents, their days were usually spent growing food, growing other plants for textiles, milking cows, tending to livestock, plowing fields, making furniture, painting that furniture, feeding their family from scratch, which often meant harvesting the food. That kind of a day, there was a lot to tend to, and also inherent in having to do all of those things from scratch or with less assistance meant that the pace of life was going to be slower. You think about that today, right? Like we're picking up our food at the grocery store, or maybe nowadays we're not even doing that. We're having our food delivered from the grocery store so that we don't have to take the time to go to the grocery store. Our clothes are made for us by somebody, we don't know who, but the clothes, we might go shopping, or nowadays we might not even go to the store. We can get online and get that done very quickly and have our clothes shipped to us while we do lots of other things, right? So the pace of life has gotten faster, but I think if our ancestors thought about the gift of time that would come from not having to grow their own food, not having to make their own clothes by hand, we're not necessarily using that speed in the ways that they might have thought would be nice. Instead, there is this immense push all the time to be doing more in the space where we don't do those things anymore. And I have long been drawn to various types of slow movements that have taken hold. And this really is an act of resistance or a revolutionary act in the face of the pace of the world. I remember being very enamored of the slow food movement when I first started reading about it 25 years ago, really starting to think about and starting to experience for myself the tremendous increase in satisfaction I got from cooking a meal from scratch and doing it slowly with more intention. And I don't know, there's some kind of magic in that because it does really seem like the food always tastes better. I recently heard something about slow dating, which I thought was beautiful. The opposite of speed dating, right? But like, how can we actually extend the amount of time that we take to get to know each other? How can we savor that process of learning more about each other and learning in a more deep way? One of the things that slowness allows for is depth. Neuroscience shows us that when we are in a more relaxed and mellow state, we are actually capable of deeper thought and more nuanced thought. I think that is a revolutionary thought all by itself, because if you think about things like the current political climate, where we really need to be thinking in a deep way, in a nuanced way about a lot of different issues, and when we as a general population are so addicted to speed and just constantly getting more and more things done, and because of that, we're actually in a more overwhelmed and stressed state than ever before. Think of the implications on our ability to think critically, to think deeply, to see the nuances in things. So actually, going slow is a little bit of a revolutionary act, isn't it? Because it's something that the overculture wouldn't necessarily condone or encourage us to do. I hope one of the unintended consequences of late stage capitalism is this constant push to be creating and building and developing and more. And I liken it to constantly inhaling, but never exhaling. That constant growth without any fallow periods, without any relaxing at all, is ultimately unsustainable. It's not in line with the laws of nature, really. We need the exhale as much as we need the inhale. We need the slow as much as we need the quick. There are definitely times where going fast is good. Nobody wants to watch a hockey game that happens slowly, right? That's not gonna get the ratings. But by the same token, as much as we give to productivity, we really need to also give space to rest and just spaciousness, really. I was reading recently in a book about positive psychology, about the tools of actually learning how to slow down, learning how to savor things. This is such an encouraging idea to me because it means that I can actually practice these things and I can get better at them over time. So I want to go over some of the ideas that are presented in this literature about these two tools, slowing down and savoring. One of the things that slowing down allows us to do is to become more present, obviously. There is a saying that I think has a lot of truth to it, that if you are in anxiety, you're probably in the future. And if you are in depression or grief or sadness, that you're often in the past. I don't know if that's always true, but I think that because we have just evolutionarily, we have a negativity bias. I think that's the term for it, a negativity bias, which is that our brains are hardwired to focus more on a negative than a positive. And that has been evolutionarily very helpful for us, right? Looking for potential danger signs in order to stay safe rather than focusing so much on the sunset that you don't hear the lion coming up behind you. But we're in a different place these days, and I think we can afford to turn our attention more to the positive. And so if anxiety is in the future, if depression's in the past, then what's available to us right here, right now is space to breathe. It is space to really take in the good that's happening right now. We have to slow down in order to really take it in, and then we can savor it by not just blowing past it, but really taking time to appreciate it. So first, let's talk about slowing down, because that all by itself is a hard thing to do. And I know it is hard for me sometimes still. A couple of thoughts are to create very concrete practices for starting out. So start small, give yourself little chunks of time where you can feel successful at slowing down and knowing that this deliberate slowing down moment has a beginning and a middle and an end. So you might think about taking a meal where you're not going to have any distractions. You're going to sit down at the table. You're not going to scroll on your phone or read the news or scroll through anything else, but really be with the meal, right? Be with your body. And by the same token, savor it through your senses, right? Really take time to smell it, to smell the different smells that are wafting up on your plate. Take time to taste each bite, to really investigate and notice, oh, what are those tastes? What's that? There's this little hint of sweetness. You might want to light a candle on your dining table just to give you a little, again, like a sense of just slowing down into this moment, to really savor the unique beauty of candlelight. It's something that elevates the moment, but I don't want to think of it necessarily as that, but it is bringing in a bit of slowness into it. So you can start with some small things. Have a meal. Another one is to go for a phone-free walk. Bonus if you can do it somewhere in nature, on a nature trail or in the woods or along the beach or along a lake. But to do it without the distractions that would keep us from really taking it in. I'm very prone to walking my dog in the morning and putting a podcast in, or using the time to make phone calls. I often have phone calls to make in the morning. And on those days where I don't have to make the phone calls during that walk, and where I don't stuff my ears with headphones, and I actually allow myself to really take in our walk, whether we are in my neighborhood or in the park nearby, or whether we make it all the way to the bigger city park near me that has nature trails. it makes a huge difference when I am distraction free and can really be present with my surroundings, to take in awe, like to allow yourself to be awed or delighted by what is around you, whether that's bird song or the sunlight peeking through the tree canopy, whether that's the bees that are busily collecting pollen on the flowers. Really taking time to come into that. That is a slowing down, but that's also a savoring technique. Moving into nature, into beauty, into awe, into delight. That is a way of savoring your moments. Same thing with food. You'll notice that these ways in to slowing down and savoring are very sense-oriented, because as I talked about in my last episode on trauma, everything that we experience through our senses, mostly through our eyes. I've just heard that we take in 80% of information through our eyes. It's really interesting. But we're also taking it in through our nose, through our ears, our tongue, our skin. And those are things that we can only ever be doing right now. We can't really be sensing anything in the future. We can no longer be sensing anything in the past. So the senses are a shortcut. Funny that I'm talking about a shortcut in an episode about slowing down and savoring, but it can be a shortcut, a gateway, let's put it that way, to this moment here, right now. Getting outside, sharing a meal, putting all the devices away or out of sight. Studies have shown that even when our cell phones, if we're having lunch with somebody, if both of our cell phones are on the table face down, we are still much more distracted than we are if those phones are off the table, in our purse, in our coat, whatever. By the same token, getting them out of your line of sight at home as well can be very helpful. I notice that in the morning I have my phone across the room charging, and if I pick up that phone when I turn my alarm clock off, because I have a real alarm clock these days, guys, it's pretty great. But when I take my phone back to bed, like I usually wake up, turn off my alarm clock, have a little bit of hot water, and come back to my bed and meditate. And if I pick up my phone, I am so much more distracted than if I just leave it across the room. Even having that much distance between me and this little gadget increases my ability to stay present and to stay focused. Another practice to slow down, and this is admittedly a difficult one for me, and I think for a lot of people, is learning how to say no a little more often and not overscheduling yourself. I remember a time when I went from thing to thing, from coffee with a friend to an audition to lunch with a friend to a class to whatever, and I would give myself not really quite enough time in between things. And so I was always having to like cut out 5 minutes early, or if I had coffee with a friend, it had to be only 45 minutes because I had to get to the next thing. And it was very unsustainable and not as enjoyable. And these days I give myself a 2-hour window. And anytime I'm seeing somebody, if I'm having lunch or coffee with someone, I give myself a 2-hour window. Are we going to have 2 hours together? I don't know. I don't know if they have that much time, but I give myself that much time in order to have a little buffer. Under scheduling, giving myself a little lull between activities and being intentional about it is very helpful for slowing down. All right, so I want to talk about savoring techniques. And again, this comes from some positive psychology literature. And I just love the words that are used for these savoring techniques. They include basking, giving thanks, luxuriating, marveling, and being mindful. So really giving yourself time to fully appreciate any kind of moment. Obviously, marveling, I think, has to do with more of the grand beauty of nature or of awesome concepts or whatever that is. Nature is a great way for me to get in touch with that sense of really being awed and delighted by what this universe is made of. Sometimes when I'm out on nature walks, I will take little pieces of nature with me and bring them back. And that actually allows me to continue to marvel in nature. I have this really beautiful pine cone that I picked up during the winter. I have 3 little acorns with their caps still on. All of that sits on my desk, and it just gives me an opportunity to really to be in touch again with the delight I feel in nature. Basking in our accomplishments. Now, that is something that our culture does not always encourage us to do, especially women. We're supposed to smile without really showing our teeth and just, oh, it's okay, it was nothing, and get on with the next thing. Get on to the next thing already. But taking a moment to really bask in your luck in a day, in your good fortune. And you can bask in a spiritual way, or you can bask in a humanistic way. Whenever I score a really good parking spot, I take a second to really bask in that and to give thanks for that little gift. Luxuriating in mindfulness, I think, again, engage the senses. Luxuriating, I think of a nice soft sweater or a hot silky bath or a nice pair of pajamas that feel really good against your skin, or some special lotion that has a really wonderful scent to it. Really allowing yourself to luxuriate in mindfulness, I think, is ultimately a key practice in all of this. Really learning how to be present and aware. I think mindfulness, ultimately, it is just the state of being aware and attentive to your moment by moment. And you can practice mindfulness and you can savor anything, even washing the dishes if you choose to. You can savor the suds on your hands. You can savor the nice smell of the soap that you're using. You can really bask in how clean this dish is and how the water gleams off of it, right? Any of those things are really powerful practices to bring us into presence and awareness and appreciation. Obviously, giving thanks, having gratitude is a wonderful way to savor. Ultimately, savoring is really about lengthening a moment a little bit, right? I think of that, lengthening a moment. I think that in our current capitalistic society, I think that I have often equated savoring with luxury in terms of status and having, and that's not really necessary. You don't have to be in luxury in order to luxuriate. In luxuriating, you are actually making an everyday thing luxurious. That's really powerful. In savoring, we are actually making our moments luxurious. We are making our moments extra indelible. We're making memories through the senses and through really paying mindful attention to our moments. The Danish author, Mike Viking, I think is how you say his name, or Mike Viking, he has written The Little Book of Hygge, The Little Book of Lykke, and he's written a number of other books. One of them is called The Art of Making Memories. And he talks about these practices, slowing down, savoring, getting present, using your senses, are how we can actually intentionally build our memory bank and fill our memory bank with positive, delightful memories. Because if we don't, again, that negativity bias that our brains naturally, evolutionarily have can like stuff that memory bank full of the negatives. And we have to work a little bit harder to consciously build a bank of more positive memories. So these are 2 ways to do that. And I encourage you to maybe work in some slow moments this week. See if you can give yourself an hour and a half to slowly make a meal from scratch and see how that feels. See if you can give yourself some time for a nice walk in the woods where your alarm won't go off if you don't make it back in 20 minutes, but actually giving yourself time to really bask in the glory of your surroundings. I would love to hear what you come up with, what you put into your schedule, and how it feels to practice slowing down, to practice savoring. What arises for you? What are you creating for yourself by taking on these practices? I would love to hear that. Thank you so much for joining me today.